please welcome Derek Bramble.
Hello, folks.
Thank you so much, Derek, for coming out, because I know that coming from your tough schedule in LA, it's always tough to get a break, and you call and you come. I got you. I want to start off this conversation by talking about your background, because clearly you got the accent. They don't have accents like that in LA. So we want to know how you got the accent, a little bit about your background, and what led to you getting involved in music production.
Okay. Well, I was born in London, 71, and at an early age I was scooped up by a couple of no-goods from Dayton, Ohio, and they came to England and they heard me play bass, and they're like, "Oh, do you want to join the band?" And the next thing you know, I was on the next ship to America, to LA, and I think the first show I did when I got to LA was the American Music Awards. Oh, really? So they kind of threw me in right at the deep end. And I just turned 14. I remember it was January, and my mum let me go. She knew it was my dream, so she's like, "Boy, if that's what you want, go get it."
So my question is, how does someone who just barely turned 14, how do you get yourself in a position to be recognized for playing bass, let alone to be selected for Heatwave to go and perform at the American Music Awards?
Well, the truth of it is my sister used to date the guitarist.
Oh.
And he came to the house a couple of months before. And there I was, this young buck, and I had this bass that my mum had kind of put on hire purchase that I guess would be what here when you Kmart, what's that thing? Layaway, you put it on layaway, So she brought me this bass, and I got really good really quickly because I slept with it. Okay. I mean, every day, school, whatever, homework, it was me and the bass, and we just, we were just part of each other, and I got really good really quick, and by the time I was 14, I had major swag,
Now, when you say you got really good really quick, before you got the major swag, what led to that? Was it the deliberate practice? Was it lessons or combination?
Yeah, I just loved it. I mean, I just loved what I was doing, and, consequently, nobody had to tell me to pick it up. Okay. Just every minute of the day I was about it, and I was also about writing songs, so I was just immersed at a very, very young age. I mean, the records my mum was playing in the house when I was a kid was, Supremes, Jackson 5, Jim Reeves. I mean, it was just and all the British acts, Rolling Stones, Beatles. My sister loved Queen, so I was just guilty by association, basically.
And so those were your influences. It sounds like your parents' influences were yours, the music they love, which is very typical. So at what point do you fall in love with a lot of the American artists over here? Who was the first American artist that really influenced you?
Elvis Presley's Roustabout album. Now, if you remember that, you're showing your age. It was a movie about this Elvis who worked in a circus or something, but he made this album, and he just looked so cool. He had his collar all flipped up, and I was, at 4 or 5 years old, however old I was, I just thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And then I liked Elvis, and then as soon as Michael Jackson came along, and that was a wrap.
It was a wrap. It was
on to the Jackson 5.
And so in Heatwave at age 14, performing at the American Music Awards, and then at what point do you become a part of the recording process?
Straight away. Okay. I mean, I was working at a studio in London called the Delane Lee Studios with Phil Ramone, and they're like, "You're in the band now, so, plug it in, let's go." And Rod Temperton, who was one of the principals in the band, he taught me from a very young age that, if this is what you love to do and you're here, then you were meant to be here, so get after it. Okay. And I did.
And so I know in a lot of the materials about you on the internet, you cite Rod Temperton as a mentor. Yeah. And so what about him made you feel that he would be a mentor for you? Or were you even thinking along those lines? Did he just become a mentor?
Well, I mean, you got to remember, I was 14 when I joined Heatwave, and the rest of the guys in the band were in their 30s. Wow. So there was this big age divide, and I mean, it kind of looked a little weird to me. But so, you know, I started writing, and he took me aside. And he's like, "Dude, you really got some talent here, but you know, you got to stop messing around. If this is what you want to do, then you got to commit to it. You know,
you got to stop messing around at 14." Right.
But I think if you see the talent there and you don't want it to go off the rails, you know, you've got to do something about it. He chose to do something about it, and he pulled me aside and, you know, showed me the ropes. And then when it was time for me that I wanted to leave Heatwave, he absconded me in the middle of the night. I shouldn't put this out there, but I'm going to put it out there because it's the truth. I got so fed up with being on the road and, you know, these blokes being the indicator of my future, that I thought, you know, at some point I've got to take on my own graft, you know. And I told Rod about it. He said, "Well, if that's the way you feel, do something about it." And I said, "Well, what do I do?" He said, "I'll call you back in 20 minutes. He said, "Are you prepared to make the moves that you've got to make to do this?" And I was like, "Of course." So he calls me back in 20 minutes and he has a plane ticket. And I'm in Dayton, Ohio at this point. Right. And so he has a plane ticket waiting for me. And he said, "Fly to Germany and I'll keep you under wraps because, you know, the boys are going to go mad because you left. And he said, I'll protect you." And that's exactly what he did. And at that time, he was working on Michael Jackson's Thriller.
Wow. So that time, what age were you at that point?
Just turned 19.
5 years. So really, that was an apprenticeship, that time you spent with Heatwave.
Absolutely.
Okay, and then from that point, you're under his tutelage. You're 19 years of age. And when do we make that evolution into songwriter?
Well, I'd always been songwriting, but once I got together with Rod, he was like, okay, those 2 weeks, while I was in Germany, we cut about 7 songs. And because he was working on the Thriller record, he loved one of my songs. And he's like, "I'm playing this to Michael and Quincy." So they send the song. Michael loves it. Quincy loves it. And at this time, I think they were 9 songs into the record. So they record the song, and it's going great. And, you know, I'm as happy as a pig in shit. And, you know, I think I've arrived and that. And he's like, "We've cut it." And I'm like, great. So I go back to London. I'm sitting at home, and I'm feeling myself. You know, I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I'm on Michael Jackson's record, yeah." I get a call about 2 weeks later saying, unfortunately, the record company want the album to be 10 tracks, not 11 tracks. And because your track was last in, it's got to be first off. So, but you know what? No, I wasn't worried about it. Because, you know, when you're young, you're stupid. You don't really care. You're just happy to be in the fight, you know? And 2 weeks later, I'm sitting at home, a little depressed. You know, because the single's flying up the charts and the album's, you know, getting ready to, you know, explode. And I get a call from Rod, and he's in Westlake Studios, and he puts the phone out into the studio, and he says, "Listen to this." And I listen, and it's Stevie Wonder putting his harmonica solo on the same track that has just been cut by Manhattan Transfer.
Spice of Life.
Which turned out to be the Spice of Life. And so, you know, one huge door closes, but another medium-sized one opens.
Right,
so,
right.
But, you know, you got, you know, your blessings come in all different guises. You just can't, you know, don't be mad at them, you know.
Now, that Spice of Life track ended up being one of the biggest songs that Manhattan Transfer
It was the biggest
recorded.
song that Manhattan Transfer ever had. It's biggest single.
Okay, but financially, if your song...
I'm not telling you how much money I made.
No, we're talking
Cheeky
about...
bugger.
Well, we're talking about this. We're talking about financially in terms of what it would have meant for you to get that one song on Michael Jackson's Thriller album.
I would not... Oh, me thingy's dead. I would have been flying my own jet here to see you instead of flying Virgin. That's the truth of that, how much money that album made.
Right,
I mean, it's just historic, you know?
Right. You see, and those are the kind of things that are, I feel like a lot of up-and-coming songwriters really need to know, just in terms of placement, just in terms of the ramifications of publishing, licensing, those types of deals. Were you fully aware of the financial ramifications at that time?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, as a kid, I just so wanted to be a writer and a producer that, I just didn't have time for the legalese, if you like. Okay. But I had great people. I had a great manager, Brian Freshwater, who really protected me, really looked out for me. But the other thing that I think kind of affords you a bit of luxury is, if you're really good and the quality of what you're doing, people will step to you the right way. And that's always been, my case. People always, they've always told me that you're worth the money. Whatever we got to pay, you're worth the money. And if you can, build that from the beginning, that's not such a shabby thing,
So you basically established yourself as a business person. You knew what your worth was as a songwriter. Now Manhattan Transfer is recording your song. Michael Jackson could have recorded your song. Where do you go from there? What's the next thing for you after the Manhattan Transfer song is cut and released?
I was producing... I was producing an artist called Jackie Graham in England. It was my first production. And we had something like 3 top 10 records in a row. And then I got a call from David Bowie and asked me to come and produce his album, which I think I'd just turned 21 at that point. Okay. And he's like, will you fly out to Switzerland, come to my house for dinner, and we'll talk about making an album. And he'd just done Let's Dance, so I'm like, shit, how am I going to follow that up?
Yeah, he was hot at the time, right. It's a hot track. Yeah. So 21 years of age. So at this point, it seems to me like there's this progression. You're building your track record. You're getting your credentials. Looking back on things in hindsight, was there any area of the business that you felt you wish you knew more about that could have perhaps maybe maximized the opportunities you had?
Tough question. Well, I was very fortunate because I had guys watching me back. Rod was watching me back. Brian was watching my back. I had a great lawyer, had a great accountant. So, after a while, I began to, get really wise and say, listen, you can't trust anybody to just be, you can't just trust anybody. You've got to know what's going on in your life. Right. You can't just let let him handle it or let her handle it. That's bollocks, You've got to be aware of what you're doing, why you're doing it, how much you're going to get paid, what's the consequences of doing this, making this decision or making that decision. You got to know, because at some point you've got to stand up on your own 2 feet and be responsible for the decisions that ultimately you have to make.
Right. And see, the reason why I want to hark upon this a little bit is because we all know the horror stories of the people who don't pay attention. And you got in at 14. You're 21 years of age having dinner with Bowie. That's kind of unusual. So now with all the people who are in our audience who are young and they are aspiring to get their songs cut and placed on somebody's album, CD project, what would you tell them that they should really be aware of in that whole process? Publishing, licensing, management, song splits.
Great song. Everything starts with a great song. If you haven't got a great song, song splits don't mean a shit. Nobody's going to want to cut it. None of that means anything if you're concentrating on that stuff. I always was taught, concentrate on the material. It's like, I used to remember when I used to come home and, the local neighbour would, be cooking up a storm and you could smell it coming halfway down the street. It's like, oh my God, she's cooking, blah, 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 I'm going to get some. If people can't smell it, they don't care about it. Do you know what I'm saying?
I know what you're saying.
So you've got to cook it up nice so that brings people to the party. Because you're always going to be like an ambulance chaser if you're writing songs and chasing people. That to me, I think, is counterproductive. Just concentrate on writing great, amazing music. And as they say, if you build it, they will come.
They will come. Okay, so when they come with their hunger because they smelt it and they're fully aroused, and they've developed a taste and
People
appetite
talk.
for it.
People talk. You know, word of mouth is worth a ton. You know, when people know that there's hot shit about your phone starts ringing, you're like, oh shit, what's going on? You'll know, and you put it out there. But I mean, I just don't believe in the adage. Rod Temperton never networked one time in his life.
Wow.
Not once. And maybe it's a bad example. I think, you know, it's just for me, one size doesn't fit all. You know, everybody's walk is a different walk. My experience is my experience. And I've always been taught from Rod, from Burt Bacharach, from, you know, writers that I really respect, concentrate on what you're doing, because what you're doing doesn't matter. The rest will just fall away.
So let's talk about that creative process, because, you know, when I talk about what is the one thing you should focus on, what you should be aware of, and then you take it back to focus on great songs. That's good. And we actually hear that with a lot of the educational seminars and workshops that we do, but we don't hear people going into what the process or the formula is for writing great songs. What do you suggest in that regard?
Oh, Jesus. That's a $64 million question, isn't it? I don't know. I just think when I was riding to the airport coming out here, I was listening to Don McLean's Vincent. And I don't know, man. That song to me is important today as it was the day it was written. And as a songwriter, you know, I love to groove and get dark as much as the next man, but, you know, it's the legacy as a songwriter that, you know, for myself, is that you really want to leave. I've got too many great examples of, whether you want to talk McCartney, if you want to talk Rod, if you want to talk Prince, or if you want to talk Dave Grohl, who I think is absolutely diamond. He's probably one of my favourite writers around right now.
Actually, you know, I want to talk Heatwave.
Like 100
I
years
usually
ago.
talk about Heatwave, you know, but the song that we used in our promo for this conversation was Always and Forever. And it's a song. How many people know the song Always and Forever?
Right.
What is it about that song that endures? What makes it stand the test of time?
Dude, I mean, Rod's cut from the cloth, you know, and he's an old soul boy, and that song is just, it's your mum and dad dancing in the kitchen together. I mean, it's that song that, you know, you wake up in the morning, your mum's vacuuming, and that's the song that's on. I mean, it just speaks to, you know, the person that's, you know, working Monday to Friday, and when it comes the weekend, you know, they're either hanging out with their kids, playing old Motown tracks. That's what we did. I mean, I joined Heatwave just after that song came out, and it was just like, people were getting married to that song, for God's sake. You know, I don't know. I can't tell you why it caught on, but when I listened to it, well, I can't tell you what was in his mind, but I can tell you why people love it, because it's simple. It says all it needs to say simply. You know, it's just a beautiful piece of music that obviously came from his spiritual side. You know?
So when we start talking about song construction, song production, do you feel that simplicity should still be the focal point?
I don't know. I mean, you know, it depends on the song. I mean, I don't think songs work in the same way. I mean, I don't care if I hear another dubstep record ever again. I mean, I'm so over noises and whoop whoop, and it's just, fuck, are you kidding me? You know, I just want, you know, like as we were driving up there, that little Ariana Grande bird, that's a cute little song. You know, it's a great little song. It's simple, it gets to the point. You know, I just think we're like kids with guns. We've got so much ammo in our back pocket. You know, and we're throwing so much stuff at people that they can't hear past the noise. You know, and I just think, you know, some of the records that I'm listening to are just broke down, simple. I was in the car the other night, and I was driving up Pacific Coast Highway, and what song should come on but Usher's That's What It's Made For? Come on. I mean, come on. Is that not one of the best R&B records of the past 10 years? That record just says it all. Jermaine Dupri just put his foot all up in it, and it just does what it needs to do without any frills or spills. Right. And it gets to the point, you know? It's great vocal, great arrangement. I mean, it's not brain surgery.
So we're looking at a generational divide here. A lot of the contemporary artists, you talk about Ariana Grande, very contemporary artist, somebody who is up and coming. She's got a lot of buzz and a lot of backing. So for a lot of the artists today, right now, that like to infuse a lot of different backgrounds, mixtures, elements in their songs, whatnot, do you think that can be kind of confusing? Or should we just say, hey, look, bring those things to the songs, but still focus on the simplicity? How are we building those great songs?
I think flavouring's flavouring. If you want to add a little this, a little bossa nova, a little acoustic guitar, whatever it is, you know, just make it tasteful. Just make it, you know, just don't get in the way of, you know, the message that's trying to be sent. You know, I just think over the past 5 or 10 years, we've had so much information thrown at us from a technical side that, you know, I think everybody's leaning, just give it to me simple so I can enjoy it and not have to kind of find my way through it or fight my way through it. And, you know, I think, you know, artists like John Legend or Miguel or, you know, it's like you said to me in the car, is there anybody that can touch Michael Jackson in this era? I was like, they can try. I mean,
actually, he started using a whole bunch of expletives and he almost spit, you know, when we were talking about that. And we're just really talking about like Neo and all the people who are supposed to be the heir apparents.
Yeah, really good artists, but, you know, I think it's a different time, and it's a little unfair to even try and compare. You know, it's that old, you know, is LeBron better than Michael Jordan? Get the fuck out of here. Right. You know what I mean? Right. It's like, come on. Right. Michael Jordan's Michael Jordan. LeBron's LeBron. Let's have two greats, not one. You know what I'm saying? Right. So yeah, when it comes to Michael Jackson, you know, I don't know, man. This, you know, you got Frank, you got Michael, you got Sammy. It's great to have more than one, and I don't think it's fair to heap it on, you know, any artist's shoulder to try and be better. Just be the best you that you can be.
Right. So that's where the flavorings come in, having different flavorings. Absolutely. So what I want to talk to you about, which is something that is central to this year's conference, which is collaboration. Mm-hmm. And in doing my research, what I came to realize that a lot of the top producers in the industry are people who have, in fact, come from bands. Right. So in coming to this realization, it became obvious to me that bands give producers an opportunity to collaborate. There's true collaboration in the sense of the word taking place there. When we look at a lot of the up-and-coming producers who have not been in bands, we're finding that a lot of their success is not as long. It's more short-lived. Yeah. What has been your perspective on producers that come from bands? Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis came from, you know, The Time. You know, L.A. and Babyface, they came from The Deal. You know, even Teddy Riley. You know, Teddy Riley came from Guy. So what is it about being in a band that enables you to really master the collaboration process?
Well, I think for me, I mean, when I was in Heatwave, I was always watching, and, you know, when my talent surfaced, the people that had no ego pulled me through. It was, you know, but, you know, listen, every situation's different. I mean, George Martin's the fifth Beatle. Do you know what I mean? I don't think it's a matter of bands. Obviously, there's always going to be a principal person or a couple of principal people in a band that carry the weight of the songwriting or the arrangements, and then a producer kind of rounds it out and blah, blah, blah. Obviously not so much today, but, you know, you look at Timbaland, you look at Pharrell. I mean, these guys have come out of situations, like you say, I mean, but you still have to battle through it to be heard. It's like, you know, coming up in a family of 6 boys. I mean, you watch 6 boys trying to get attention, you know, it's going to be a battle. You know what I mean? But, you know, the strongest will survive, or the best will come through, and it will reveal itself. I think collaboration should have nothing to do with music. I think collaboration should have everything to do with, do I want to have a beer with you? Do I want to watch your kid while you're out somewhere? That to me is what, you know, collaboration is about. And it's about, you know, people. It's about people. I mean, I had the best time when I was a kid and we had shitty equipment and we'd all gather around my mate's dad's garage and we'd light it up and they'd bring in burgers and hot dogs, and while we made a racket. I mean, we were the worst sounding little band, right. But the mums and barps, and they just, I mean, it was just about us being a garage band and just making it hairy. You know what I mean? And I still hold that very dear to me. It's not what we do, it's how we do it and who we do it with. And I'm very discerning because I'm really good at what I do and I know it. I don't need to swing my dick in anybody's face. Do you know what I'm saying? I know that I can get, you know, I can get in the ring. Right. And I think it's really important. Sorry, I didn't mean it to sound like that. Sorry. But you know what I'm saying, yeah? Listen, I'm English. I'm sorry, not that's an excuse, but I've got a mouth like a sailor. What can I tell you? I think it's important to know who you're writing with and why you're writing with them, or why they're in your life. Because I've had many situations where I've had people come to the studio, like artists come to the studio, and they sit in the corner for 4 hours and do fuck all. And then they want 50% of my song. I'm like, get out of here. You did nothing. Don't just be guilty just by association. If you're going to come in here, jump in. Here it is. Right. You know?
Make some contribution.
Yeah, just, you know, and it's not all like that, but, you know, it's about choices. And you lay down with dogs, you wake up with fleas.
Right. So with this collaboration, and you talk about us mainly just hanging out, doing something with people. You talk about developing a rapport, relationship, chemistry. Tracy Cruz spoke to that on the previous panel. Just connecting with people. So those people become resources for you. Now, with a lot of the up-and-coming artists right now who have not been in bands, who sit at home in the studio, and they basically don't go out, they just make their beats and whatnot. So let's talk about them for a minute. The beat makers. Okay.
God bless them.
God bless the beat makers.
God bless them. I mean,
what's the difference between a beat maker and a producer?
A beat maker will not know how to mic a set of drums. He will not know how to mic a 12-string Gretsch or Guild. But that's not to say that that's a bad thing. I just think that, for me, if you're in a business, you want to know anything and everything that's going to help you get to the finish line. And I've grown up at a time where, you know, what was once old is new again. And I'm working with a lot of bands, and I've never had so much fun in my life being in a studio with a bunch of beer-smelling, you know, rock and rollers getting after it. It's just so much fun, and knowing what to do in those circumstances is everything. Because if you don't know what what you're doing, you're going to get exited real quick. You know, people ain't got time to fuck around.
The beat maker and the producer. If we look at the songs that beat makers are making, some of them are hitting the charts. So there are beat makers who are very successful. Whether or not that success is sustainable, I mean, it remains to be seen. But as far as the distinction for those individuals who don't read music, those individuals who don't play instruments, what disadvantages do you think they have over those who do?
They're limited only by their imagination. That's it. I think there are some beat makers out there that are doing fantastic work, and you know, it leads some of us out of the dark, you know, because we don't know it all, and we've got to be open to other ideals, ideas and other ways of doing things, but it shouldn't stop you from going back, because I don't think you can go forward if you haven't looked back. Do you know what I mean? I think it's very important that if you're going to be a student of rock and roll, R&B, whatever, know where it comes from, know where the cloth is. And if you feel like you're cut from the cloth, respect the cloth and do what Robin Thicke didn't do.
So let me ask you this now. Let me ask you this. Because there are a lot of people here who have a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of different influences. Let's look at your influences. This is really interesting. Bob Marley, the Beatles, Marvin Gaye. So when I look at your body of work, I can actually see where you've pulled from all these different influences. So a lot of the people here now who are beat makers, they're pulling from other beat makers. Where does that lead them?
I don't know. It's an interesting question. I don't know. Who knows what's down the line? As I said before, I think it's very important to be different, be brave first and foremost. Because if everybody in LA is, the thing they say is, oh, it's got to sound like Kesha. I'm just like, that's like calling my mum a bitch. Do you know what I mean? That's like dirty. That's not cool to me. You know what I'm saying? If you come in, we've got to write a song like Kesha. No, it's not going to be a good session. Do you know what I mean? So there's ways of moving it forward and being brave. And I mean, my dad's American. My mum's from the Caribbean. I'm a huge Bob Marley fan. In any music that I do, there's got to be some reggae influence in it. So I feel like I'm not connected. Listen, there's some great rap artists out there, some great hip-hop producers, but I think they, with Dre, I mean, Dre's had his day, and I think he's done some great work, but I want some new shit. I really want to hear, another Outkast record. That's what I really want to hear. I want to hear another Outkast record. Wouldn't it be great if Tribe got back together and threw down a little bit? You know what I'm saying? But I also like some of the new stuff. I mean, this bird came to my house the other day, and all she was talking about is this bloke, Miguel this, Miguel that, blah, blah, blah. And, I listened to the track, and I was just like, yeah, and? I just really think that we've become so numbed down to what is supposed to be good that the good is getting lost. I mean, the truth of the matter is, a 250, or maybe she's 300-pound girl came out from England and kicked everybody's ass. Kicked everybody's ass. Did they see that coming? Hell no. No, they didn't. And I bet you any money she went to 10 record companies and every one of them turned her down. Now look, XL picked her up and they got the biggest share in British history.
So you're talking about Adele, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're talking about Adele. So let's go back to what makes that work, because for the people here, because this is the Bay Area Producers Conference, we take a great deal of pride in the fact that we focus on producers and songwriters. So we want to make sure that people get some solid takeaway information with regard to songwriting and production here.
Okay.
What makes the Adele songwriting stick? Why does it work? Why has it gotten all the notoriety that it has?
Because it's organic. Organic, and it's really good, thought-provoking writing. When I heard Set Fire to the Rain, I nearly crashed the car. That shit was so dope that I was like, whoa. I mean, I remember where I was when I first heard ABC when I was a kid. I also remember where I was when I heard Superstition. I also remember where I was when I heard Set Fire to the Rain.
Yeah, those are moments. They kind of like
moments, mate.
They definitely capture you. What other artists besides Adele do you think is worthy of recognition and notoriety, but has
Foo
not gotten it?
Foo Fighters.
Foo Fighters.
I just love what they do and what they mean and what they give back to rock and roll. If you guys haven't seen Sound City, you should check it out. It's one of the best documentaries I've seen in a long time. and it pays homage to everything that was once good in LA, that was rock and roll.
And that's Sound City?
Sound City.
Sound City.
It's full on. Who else do I like? Muse. Really like Muse. I really like Katy Perry. I mean, don't hate me for it, but I think she's really, really good. I think they're clever songs. Max Martin is a beast. And, you know, I enjoy the records. What have I heard lately that has blown me away? Laura Mvula, who my son is on the road with, and he flies into San Francisco tonight. I don't know where she's playing, but she's a great artist, and my son was just with her and Prince in Sweden 2 weeks ago, and my boy's 20 years old, and he's out with Laura Mvula living the life. So I'm a proud papa. What can I tell you? Yeah.
So let's talk about country music, everybody's favorite genre. I love country music, I really do. And I'm not being facetious either. What can we learn about country music with regard to songwriting?
That at the moment, I wholeheartedly believe that some of the best songs right now are coming out of country. And I don't care what anybody says. They're paying attention. They're going deep. They're not pulling any punches. And they don't care what other people think. And that to me is the biggest thing. I don't think they're putting up so they don't have to shut up. Do you know what I mean? And I've heard some of the greatest songs. There's a Toyota truck ad that they're using this country record for, and the lyric is just, have you guys seen it? Are they playing it out here? They're talking about, oh, he's a this, that, the other, and he's strong like this, and it's really telling, and it stopped me in my tracks. I was like, look at this shit. This is great. You know, so it's speaking to me. I mean, I'm walking around scratching my ass, minding my own business, and it stops me right in my tracks. Right. That's when music does something, you know?
Right. So going back to what you're talking about with regard to the simplicity and the message, I think there's always this message component that I love about country music, which coincidentally I think is the thing that makes rap so popular, is that there is a message in really good rap. How do we hone the message? How do we become better storytellers in our songs?
Spend less time talking and more time listening.
Think about that. Spend less time talking and more time listening. Listening to whatever's going on around you.
Listen to your mom, listen to your girl, listen to your kids, just listen to the world and see what it's saying, and then, you know, take it in, absorb it, marinate, and then, you know, tell the story about it.
So the artistry lies within the interpretation of what it is that you're hearing
Absolutely.
and seeing. Absolutely.
I think, you know, we're so kind of glass half empty because people are afraid. You know, you've got record company A&R men that they say, well, give me a track that sounds like this. Well, why do I want to give you a track that already sounds like something you've already done? You know, so you're being minimized at every creative step. And I just think, you know, if you're in a position enough to say no, because what it does, it's put, you know, it's like a big size 10 boot being put on the throat of the art. And art cannot, you know, survive with a big boot on it. But it takes somebody to stand up and say, no, I'm not going to do that. Yeah, it's a brave step, and you might not eat for a couple of years, but you've got to do it because in the long run, it's going to help you.
So you had the fortune of working with, at the time, was one of the most publicized vocalists, Elliot Yamin from American Idol. He was the second runner-up, and a lot of people were buzzing about him and his talent. When the record company selected you to produce, did you have those type of constrictions like that?
No. When they called me, they're like, Derek, just give us a hit. And they just said, and when I turned in both the tracks, they accepted them, and that was it. I mean, I've been very, very fortunate not to have too many people kind of micromanage me. And that's a luxury that, for me, I never stop thinking about how fortunate, because, you know, when you're being micromanaged at every step, it's soul destroying. And I've seen other producers go through it, and it's not a fun experience. And what it does, it ends up choking the life out of the product and out of the music. And, you know, you've got some smart A&R men out there that know that not to get in the way, because nobody's telling, you know, Timberlake and Timbaland how to make their record. It's like, just turn it in by this date and we'll keep it moving.
Right. So let's talk about that a little bit, because a lot of people here will never know what it's like to have that type of oppressive condition, being under the thumbprint of the label and even with the publisher. A lot of people are DIY. Right. So when those people think about the freedom, the latitude they have to be creative, so they're very fortunate. But there's another side to this which a lot of people don't really talk about, the system of checks and balances. What do you do as an independent artist when getting the feedback that can really help you grow? So somebody like you, or somebody who would typically be in the role of the record company or the publishing company, to say, hey, look, you know, maybe you need to look into having a vocal arrangement, if you know what that is.
Right. In my experiences, it's important to have a great team. If you're an artist, a budding young writer, it's really important to have a really good team that know who you are and know what you're trying to say around you. Not everybody has that luxury. That's a tough one, because you've got to live and die by your own. I believe in you live and you die by your own sword. I'd much rather fall on my own sword than have somebody stick me in the back with theirs. Do you know what I mean? Because if I fail, let it be fail because of me. Don't let me fail because I listen to some arsehole that doesn't know fuck all about what I'm trying to do. Do you know what I mean? And so it's important to stand your ground, but don't be closed to the ideas. You know, you've got to know who you are and what you're trying to say, and how potent is the way that you're saying it. How are you delivering this message? Are you delivering this message the best way possible? How can somebody else help you magnify what you're trying to do? And be open to suggestion. None of us can do it alone. And sometimes, you know, you're going to find the right person, or sometimes you're going to spin your wheels. But, you know, it's the truth of it. It's a crapshoot any way you look at it.
So it's a crapshoot any way you roll the dice. But you had Rod Temperton.
Yeah,
you
I
had
was very fortunate.
Somebody to take you under their wing, to give you the feedback, to be like, hey, try this instead of that, more of this, less of that. Are we suggesting that everyone here have somebody that they work with, somebody who can offer the guidance? Is that something that you think would benefit people?
Well, there's not a Rod Temperton standing on every corner of, you know, San Francisco, I don't think. It works differently for different folks. I just think that, you know, if songwriting and production, whatever it is your love. I mean, I was told at an early age, if you want to do this, love what you're doing. Don't expect to make any money from it. And I was told that very early. The fact that I was able to make a living from it was as much a surprise to me as anything. Because I loved what I was doing so much, almost to a fault. But I'd probably be doing this if I wasn't getting paid. Be the truth of it, you know?
Yeah. Who told you that? Who was the person that told you don't expect to make any money from it? Who was that?
Rod Temperton.
Wow. Wow. So I want to just ask you just a couple of more questions before we open it up for Q&A. So if you guys have questions, please formulate them, because you're going to get your chance in the next 2 minutes. So at this point, you know, there's a DIY movement in the music industry. A lot of people don't want record deals, although a lot of people are kind of iffy about how they feel about music publishing deals. As a DIY artist, What are the advantages and disadvantages of having a publishing deal?
They're not going to like me saying this, but I personally don't think there's any advantage having a publishing deal other than maybe an administration deal. Yeah, because at the end of the day, if they give you 50 grand and, they sign you to a 10-song deal, 10 releases, I mean, chances are you're never going to meet that commitment. So you're always going to be in suspension. So... But people need the money, so it's like, what do I do? Do I take the deal, or do I think if you're successful and you can recoup, then it's all good. But there's no crystal ball that's going to tell you that that's going to happen. So it's a risk any way you slice it. You know what I mean? But personally, I've seen how publishing deals are done, and they sign you for the first 6 months. They send you this place, that place, but if they don't see a return on their investment in a very short time, they move on. So you're left there to fend for yourself, and that to me is kind of whack. It's just
left to fend for yourself with the debt.
With the debt, you still owe them the money, and they're not getting you your cuts. That's going to help you out of your debt.
Gotcha. So at that point. And a lot of people here have heard that music publishing deals can, in fact, lead to record deals or give them leverage in record deals. What would you take on that? Absolutely.
I mean, if you're going in as a writer, I'm coming from just a writer's point of view. But if you're going in as an artist, and the publishing company say, "Hey, this, she's going to get signed. This is an album that we can invest in." Blah blah blah. Then it's a slightly different set of circumstances. But that can go tits up too. And I'm not trying to paint a doom and gloom thing here. What I would like to is be strong in the knowledge of who you are and what you're trying to do, and know that it's not easy. It's an uphill climb, but if you've got the mustard and your shit is good, you will rise to the top. That's the natural selection. You'll get through it. I mean, it's definitely not for the faint of heart.
So what about this notion that music licensing, if pursued properly, can then be the equivalent of having a publishing deal for songwriters? What's your take on that?
Well, I have a couple of friends that have companies and they do sub-licensing around the world, and I've seen it be really advantageous for them and their writers because they're just not locked into one principle. Because obviously, if you're with BMG, you've got BMG and all over the world, but, it's pretty much the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing, or the left hand doesn't care what the right hand's doing. So it doesn't really matter. So what? Yeah, you bring in, we've got this record that's bubbling in San Francisco. Can we get that to translate to France, or can we get... Unless you got, you're dealing with the engine and not the oily rag, because if the president picks up the phone and says, make this happen, then it's got a chance of happening. But if you've got people not talking to each other... And the problem I find with publishers, and I'm going to say it, I hate when people make themselves bigger than the music. You know what I'm saying? I've seen situations where A&R men or publishers, and they put themselves in front of the music. And it's like, dude, that's the cart leading the horse. And it's not healthy, and that's why people are not really feeling publishers anymore, because they're not guaranteed any real support unless it comes from someone right at the top that says, watch this artist, take care of my girl, or it's your ass. I mean, if somebody's got to do that every time you're going to run out of people to do the job.
Versus music licensing, where you're controlling all of that, you're directing.
Absolutely, you dial it in, and you want, especially if it's non-exclusive. You can have this thing parrying everywhere, and especially if you can find someone in Europe that covers Europe, because basically what we're talking about is Australasia, America, and Europe. I mean, my publishing relationship in the South America is I've made money, but it's not. It's like Russia. It's playing, but you don't know when you're going to get paid. Do you know what I mean? And they might pay you in rubles.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like there's definitely something to investigate and explore, especially with regard to music licensing, because we often talk about music licensing a lot, and I think that my take is that a lot of people, they hear about it, but they don't know enough about it. And my final question to you is, if we look back over your career, all the things that you've done, what is the most important lesson that you've learned with regard to being successful in the industry?
Not to take myself too seriously.
A little bit of levity.
Yeah, just have a laugh with it, because when the clapping stops and everybody's finished patting you on the back, you're just going to be left with you and your work and the friends you've made in the business, and the mark that you've left. And to me, every day I walk across my yard to my studio, I feel, Jesus, I could be putting small shoes on big feet, in another life, but I get to do this. So I'm very, very fortunate, and I love what I do, and man, I think this songwriting thing, especially listening to Don McLean's Vincent, it's like, however meat and potatoes I like to think I am, it's like it's songs come from a total spiritual realm, and it's like other artists trying to connect with other artists on another level, and every once in a while I'm reminded of how much of a gift that really is, So I'm one of the lucky ones.
Nice. Please give a round of applause to Derek Bramble.